So let's talk about homophobia, and before we get into it, must be sensitive to those who have experienced discrimination and even straight up violence from others because of our sexual orientation. That's kind of what this is going to be about. And just kind of like as a definition of what, homophobia even is, anything that stigmatizes or denigrates, calls something bad, being gay is bad, or any certain behavior, so men having sex with men, that behavior as being lesser than men having sex with women. Also, identifying being gay or bisexual or anything like that, stigmatizing and denigrating any of that, same-sex relationships, any of these sort of things that are just not the, normative heterosexual sort of thing going on, that you can consider that homophobia, and some sort of fear there of those things. So just looking at the statistics on hate crime, considering those who are identified as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, about 30% have been physically attacked or threatened. So if you look at, Bowling Green's campus, pretty much that's at least 1,000 students who have encountered this sort of egregious behavior. And thankfully, hate crimes now are subject to more severe sentences than other crimes. So if you are attacked because of your sexual orientation versus if you're just attacked blindly on the street or something like that, the hate crime would have a harsher sentence even if the action is the same. Say both people punched a person in the face, the one that's the hate crime is going to get a harsher sentence. And, throughout a lot of our history, LGBTQ folks have just pretty much had to lay low for a long time and not talk about their sexuality and whatnot because of the heat that they may receive from others and whatnot for being within that group. And so the Shepard-Byrd Act in 2009 is very important for us to recognize that Congress passed this legislation in 2009 saying that any sort of attacks based on someone's orientation or gender identity is a crime, thankfully. And so your book talks about what are the causes of homophobia and hate crimes. I think it's interesting to look through that. Your book talks about how, in one way it is a poor understanding of just differences between people. I'm not sure if that's more, as far as poor understanding, I'm not sure if that's more of a causal explanation of what caused their homophobia, or if that's more just a general description of homophobia. Here's a good study that was done in 2017 showing that rigid and traditional gender role expectations that men should be in a relationship with a woman and that man should be working and providing for the woman, and furthermore, everyone should always be doing that forever. So holding that real rigid gender role expectation tends to be correlated with homophobia, as you can imagine. This would be another little line of research that would be interesting for like a final research paper. Another kind of theory on what causes homophobia is just like a straight up suppression of homosexual feelings. So an individual, even though that they may have committed a hate crime against a gay male and whatnot, very much may be that they are homosexual themselves and haven't really processed that fact. So someone like Reverend Ted Haggard, you could look him up. He was, very, very much against homosexuality and whatnot, even though he was actually homosexual himself. And, a little sub point here as far as like what are the societal harms of homophobia, is that it can really affect the depth and satisfaction that many men have for each other, like in friendship and whatnot. We've talked about this before a little bit, that men may not be, even if they're straight, may not be comfortable really being emotionally vulnerable with another man just because of their homophobia and whatnot. And so that can get in the way of having like a true, genuine connection and whatnot to another human being. And as you can imagine, people who have a lot of exposure to the LGBT community, individuals within it and whatnot, basically the more friends that they have and acquaintances and whatnot within this community, especially those who are out, the more likely they are to be accepting of homosexuality, as you can imagine. Alright, let us look at the gay rights movement. Alright. So, as far as the gay rights movement in the United States, it kind of began, a lot of people would say, like if you read books on the gay rights movement, may say something like in 1969, that it started with the Stonewall incident. I know that most of you probably haven't heard of it before. So remember, this is kind of building up to it. In the 1950s, 60s, and before that, same-sex relationships were illegal. It was more so in the form of, they called it the anti-sodomy laws, considering that anal sex between men would be sodomy, even though that's, normally like men who have sex with children. I'm not sure those are not related, but anyway, it was illegal to have oral and anal sex, and that was in order to control the sexuality of gay people and whatnot. So 1950s, 1960s, just remember that sort of stuff was actually illegal in the United States. But there was this place called the Stonewall Inn, I think it was in New York, where a lot of people in the U.S. who were downtrodden LGBTQ folk who have had a really hard time in society and whatnot fled to places like New York. And then there was this basically a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn, and the police raided the Stonewall Inn, and just because it was, quote unquote illegal to be gay, so you have this gay bar and then police came and invaded it because it was against the law and whatnot, all that sort of stuff. But thankfully, it resulted in a riot. And so that's kind of where the gay rights movement really started, was a Stonewall incident in 1969. And just looking at the civil rights of homosexual folk, their civil rights are interested in things like decriminalization of private sexual behavior, like we were just talking about, where it used to be a crime to have anal sex and oral sex and things like that. So as far as homosexual civil rights, they're very interested in decriminalizing those sort of things. And then anti-discrimination sort of things in the like in the military, where it's like the don't ask, don't tell policy, where of course if you're straight in a same opposite sex relationship and all this sort of stuff, I'm sure people in the military openly talk to each other about that, and that's okay. So it's a don't ask, don't tell for people in same-sex relationships. So it's discrimination. And let us just remember that in your lifetime, in my lifetime, thankfully, same-sex marriage is legal in all states. 2015. We already went over that, but just to be add a little bit of a detail to this as far as the overturning the sodomy law. So it was not until 2003, Lawrence versus Texas, the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, we're going to stay out of people's private bedrooms and whatnot, and not say, if oral and anal sex is legal or not. I mean, can you just imagine, like in 2002, it's more so implemented before that, but like in 2002, oral and anal sex being illegal is pretty mind-boggling. And so, of course, even though these laws before 2003, like not to have anal sex with anyone, it's not like a single couple that was opposite sex, I guess you can call it a straight couple or whatever, if they had anal sex, it's not like they would be taken to jail or fined or anything like that. It was totally for the suppression of homosexual behavior. So looking at the world as a whole, you can see the blue countries here is where same-sex marriage is allowed. So, mostly Western Europe and the U.S., kind of like you would imagine, we're pretty culturally similar in ways. But then you have like Brazil, and I think that's Argentina, where it is legal, and then Australia, also kind of similar culture to the U.S. and Western Europe. But look at all these white countries, mostly in Africa and a lot of Europe, that same-sex marriage is not okay. I'm not sure about China here. That would be interesting to know, because that's a heavy hitter there. And so this is a little excerpt from our book talking about how gay men and lesbian women, basically what you can make of this graph is that if you look at over the past 20 years, the acceptance rates, like societal approval of same-sex marriage, it's been like about half and half. Half the country and people who are surveyed still saying, no, I think that same-sex marriage should not be allowed, and then half the people saying that it should be allowed. So still kind of get this little bit of controversy there on that issue. So same-sex marriage, as you can imagine, I mean, the whole reason that we fought so hard for same-sex marriage is, just general respect in society for same-sex marriages as compared to opposite-sex marriages. But, more than that, there's psychological benefits to being married for whoever is married. So there's some research on that, and I bet you there's more research on that than these two studies, like Buffy in 2011. I mean, I know with my wife, like when we were, just to give like one example, we got married, at the beginning of this semester and whatnot, and we got just like so many gifts from all of our, like my family and her family and whatnot, and it just shows like how much support there is for our relationship and whatnot. And I'm a man, she's a woman. Like if my wife was a man, I'm not so sure really, that there would be as much approval from our friends and family and whatnot over our relationship. So it's just kind of like why would same-sex couples get more, opposite-sex couples get more social support and whatnot for their marriage and whatnot. But hopefully, in the future, same-sex marriages will get, an equal amount of social approval and social blessings and social, letting that couple know that they're supported by their friends and family and whatnot. And as you can imagine, discriminatory laws and things like that create a lot of stress for LGBT folk. So there's a couple studies on that that have been done showing that. So saying that like before same-sex marriage was legal, how much stress that could put on a same-sex couple. This was from our book. I'm not sure which page, but each time in the past when a law was changed to establish greater equality and privacy in marriage, opponents fought the change, many claiming that it went against God's will and would ruin the institution of marriage. So those are the sort of, reasons that people were like, no same-sex marriage, because marriage is supposed to be between a man and a woman, sort of thing. And so you can kind of see how that belief that marriage is for procreation, sort of thing. So if it's a same-sex marriage, how are they even going to procreate, sort of thing. Just a little side note there, the Roman Catholic Church has spent over $2 million lobbying against same-sex marriage, but fortunately that didn't turn out for them. Alright, so that'll end us talking about sexual orientation. So, alright, let us turn to chapter 10, our chapter on contraception. And I'm just going to focus, mostly, I'm not going to go through, like your chapter goes through just like all these different ways to prevent pregnancy and whatnot, and a description of them and all that. And, you can read that on your own understand that very well and whatnot. But as far as what we're going to focus on, I tried to make it just the material that's like psychologically relevant. So pictured here is Margaret Sanger. We'll talk about her in a second, but we'll look at kind of a historical perspective of contraception in the United States. So the Comstock laws of the 1800s, those against public education on contraception. So, the U.S. literally saying that it's illegal to do, things like we're doing right now in this class, talking about contraception and whatnot. It was like literally illegal to do all those sort of things. 1915, Margaret Sanger came around, and she was saying, women have no control over whether they have a baby or not, and it's such a life-altering sort of thing that happens, the pregnancy and having the baby, and whatnot, that it completely can change a woman's life. And, yeah, that's all I want to say about that. And so she violated laws such as, providing education to the public on contraception and whatnot, and had to flee to Europe. For the most part, Europe has typically been more progressive or ahead of the curve compared to the U.S. as far as sexual issues go. So she had to flee to Europe for that. And remember when we talked about Simone de Beauvoir, one of the philosophical feminists that we talked about, and she talks about in her book and whatnot, reproductive slavery, women basically being forced to reproduce, and that keeps them in a very specific role in our society and not able to do things like pursue education and career options and whatnot. Let us look at Griswold versus Connecticut Supreme Court ruling. Not exactly sure what year this was exactly, but the U.S. Supreme Court saying that married couples can buy contraceptives and use contraceptives. So it was in 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut. So think about that. Like, before 1965, my mom, like, for instance, was born in 1951. So she was born into our society when contraceptives were outlawed. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around that sort of thing. So Griswold versus Connecticut. And then, oh, hold on. Someone's outside. Maybe a delivery. Let me pause it because my dog goes very berserk when someone comes to the door. Hold on real quick. Alright, let's look at Eisenstadt and Baird. So this was in 1972, U.S. Supreme Court ruling saying that, let's go back up to this one first. So Griswold versus Connecticut was saying that, the U.S. Supreme Court saying that married couples finally can buy contraceptives and use contraceptives according to the government. And then it wasn't until 1972 that unmarried people could buy contraceptives and use them. So just looking at the prevalence rates in the United States of women who use contraceptives, 99% of women in reproductive age, so, about 18 years and 18 to 65 or 60, something like that, 99% of those women have used contraception before. So that's a pretty high percentage. So we went from, in our society, relatively no one using much contraceptives and whatnot, kind of like before the 60s and whatnot, to like almost all women have using contraceptives at some time. Very different. I think in, a lot of ways, society has progressed. As far as U.S. teenagers, the contraceptive use has definitely improved and whatnot, but the U.S. still suffers from some of the highest rates of teen pregnancy and abortion among developed countries, and that may be because it's very challenging for teenage girls to, teenage adolescents to get a hold of contraceptives. It looks like in our society that children are more likely to be planned. So the use of contraceptives until someone's like financially stable and things like that, and then they take the contraceptives out, become pregnant and that sort of thing happening like that. And depending on one's culture and religious group, there are different there's different attitudes and levels of acceptance of contraceptive use. And so, what's the importance of contraception? Well, one of the biggest things is abortions, and so many people are not able to raise a child, have the money for all of that. But, everyone is very, most people are very sexual and whatnot. So, if we're able to use more contraception and whatnot, there would be far fewer abortions. So I think that, in your book takes this position that it would be pretty interesting to see what would happen if, like a really good pill as far as birth control was, we were able to get it over the counter as opposed to getting a prescription for it and whatnot, so that, some people like teenage women would be able to get the contraception without their parents' approval. So worldwide, contraception, it's not just the U.S. that contraception is increasing a lot. It's, across the world as well. At the same time, a lot of countries don't use much contraception. So just looking at Nigerian women, 94% of Nigerian married women do not use contraceptives. And just comparing that to U.S. women, like about 30% of married women abstain from contraceptives. So it's an interesting question to pose. 94% of married women in Nigeria don't use contraceptives, but they're probably having sex regularly. do all of them want to have a child? Just a interesting question to pose there. So at the moment, our population in the entire world is 7.8 billion. In 2000, the year 2000, there was only 6 billion people. So that's a lot more that's here on Earth than there was. Looking at 1953, there were 2.3 billion. So we're really looking at a big problem as far as being able to sustain all these people who are being born. So that's just an issue for contraception and whatnot. And we're seeing the most growth in population in poorer countries and whatnot. Babies. So we're kind of focusing here on the psychology of being a parent, becoming a parent, becoming pregnant, and or also living child free, and then we're going to touch on the abortion issue as well. So it's like, well, how does conceiving children even, how does that relate to the psychology of sexuality? Well, I mean, a lot of people, especially, those who are in a relationship with the opposite sex, a natural extension of their romantic relationship with each other can often result in a baby. So that, it's kind of tangentially related to psychology of sexuality. So, as most of us know, deciding to have a child is, something that we should deliberate about and say, I do have the option of not having children, not adopting children or anything like that. Or for some people may have the option to have a child, adopt a child sort of thing. And obviously it's a very important decision because it's very lifelong. Most of our children live to, outlive us. And it's a relationship that we're committing to for the rest of our lives. And, raising a child is very expensive as well. So check out this little video on the joys of parenthood. I think that she puts it well as far as the benefits, some of the benefits of having kids and whatnot. And it kind of boils down to having that other loving relationship, with someone that you may have created. But of course there are advantages to remaining childless. So like having more time for yourself, to pursue your hobbies and career and things like that, more time to spend with your romantic partner and whatnot. So all these things, whereas like having a child is so time consuming, money consuming, just generally consuming, and all this stuff. Not having a child, you have all this extra time and money that you can be spending it on other things. Be more spontaneous, just be like, hey, I'm gonna go to Brazil or whatever, and not having to necessarily think through how if you can bring your child and whatnot. I don't know if that was the best example, but something like that. And research also shows that I'd like to look a lot more in detail at this research, but some research shows that marriages with children tend to be more stressful, like the people within the relationships say that they experience more stress than people who don't have children. Advantages of having children. Like I was saying, it's another relationship, another loving relationship that you have and can have. And then some research shows kind of on the opposite, even if it's a little more stressful maybe it's a little more stressful to have a child on the relationship and whatnot. Some couples report that their love is enhanced for each other by having a child. And, this can kind of make sense. It's like, especially if it's a man and woman who have a child, then it's kind of like, it's like a symbol of their relationship always in front of them, their child. Some research shows that having children builds one's self-esteem and a sense of accomplishment. And a lot of people report feeling greater meaning in life and general life satisfaction and whatnot, having children. So what does the research show on what the experience of pregnancy is like? As you can imagine, there are a lot of people report, or women report a lot of, hold on real quick. Women report a wide range of experiences as far as being pregnant, as far as a lot of positive sort of feelings and then a lot of negative sort of feelings. Of course, pain and nausea and all that sort of stuff can get in the way of having a overall positive experience. Just like a brief little survey that's been given out to pregnant women, asking their range of whether they actually liked being pregnant or not. 35% said that they loved it, so that's kind of interesting. 40% mixed feelings, which kind of makes sense. You're kind of like anticipating a new child being born and all this stuff, so positive feelings could be there. And 8% hated being pregnant. And about 12% of women experienced depression while they were pregnant. And most likely this is the result of physical changes that are happening within the woman's body. So looking at abortion type issues, how do most women decide whether to have an abortion or not? Typically it boils down to financial type issues by and large, as far as electing to have an abortion. And the men who impregnated the women do have responsibility within this decision of having the abortion and whatnot, but they don't have the final say so about that. And a lot of women report some pretty negative emotions that typically surround abortions. So of course it's not a a trite issue. Feelings of loss and sadness, guilt, and all sorts of stuff that can result from having the abortion, but typically it doesn't last a long time, those sort of feelings and whatnot. And so a lot of people very desperate women very desperate once they become pregnant who are not in a position to raise a child. A lot of times there would be like illegal abortions that occurred. And so Roe versus Wade, which we've talked a little bit about in this class, which was a U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1973, legalizing abortions, and so that was in 1973 that happened. And currently, as far as the issue of pro-life versus pro-choice in the U.S., is still kind of split about 50-50 as far as attitudes towards abortion. And this is a little interesting side note here, that a lot of pro-life advocates also are against contraception. So a lot of these people are pro-life, so they say, no, you can't have abortions. And then they also say, no, you can't use contraception. And so it's kind of like this dual problem that it's like, well, I can't use contraception. Well, I got pregnant. It's like, well, it's just like a very controlling sort of mentality that some pro-life advocates have. Not really considering how, especially people who are in low income situations, just saying, well, you shouldn't have intercourse. Maybe one of the positions or whatnot seems a little unrealistic and whatnot.